Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us once again on Dojo Live. It's my pleasure to be here with you today on what is today. I think it is already the 12th of July. My name is Kim Lantis, and joining me as co-host is America Guerrero.
Hey, everybody. Hello,
Hey,
Marcus.
here she is. And yes, thank you. Our guest for today is Marcus Siegel, who is the CEO of ForeVR Games. Thank you for joining us out of LA, right? Venice Beach, Marcus?
Venice Beach.
Awesome. And he's got his dog accompanying him there in the background. But unfortunately, the cute pupper, we can't quite see him. We can't quite see him on camera, but hopefully we'll get there, right? We got to have the real star of the show, which is always the dog, right? Perfect.
Don't tell him that. He's going to go run wild with the ego.
He's part of the marketing. Yeah.
Yes, perfect. So today we're actually going to be talking about the metaverse, more specifically the future of the metaverse. But before we do, we'd love to get to know you, Marcus, a bit better. If you could please share about yourself, your background, what makes you tick, and kind of what led up to ForeVR.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. And I'm really excited to tell the ForeVR story. I've been working in Silicon Valley before I moved to LA for 20 years. And I was the COO of game studios at Zynga. And in that experience, we created a genre of social games that connected people of all ages and all abilities. And, it was a great success. And I found a lot of joy and passion in creating these kinds of games that, grandparents could play with their grandchildren. And, after, leaving Zynga, I worked at Y Combinator and Google Launchpad, helping other startups realize their visions. And then I realized, what I was really looking for was my next thing to build. And what I found in virtual reality is that perfect moment, the opportunity to create those games, that kind of umbrella that brings people of all ages and abilities together and play. And so what we're really doing is we're taking that kind of Wii Sports, everyone knows the rules, translating games that exist in real life into this new modality. And so, creating the greatest bowling game ever in darts, and we have a bunch of other games coming out, and then bringing them into VR and making them fantastic. You're bowling with your friends on the moon or in Atlantis. And, basically making games that, like, my father, who's 83, can play with his grandson who lives on the other side of the country, and he's 16. And, to me, that opportunity was too great to ignore. And yeah, that's 20 years of my life in 30 seconds.
Wow, I love it. It reminds me of a show that we had recently all about gaming and the purpose being connection, which I think sometimes you have like the naysayers or, techs getting in the way of real life. But it doesn't have to be that way. It's all about, I think, enhancing. And I think that's very beautiful. So let's talk about where you are right now with ForeVR. Obviously, the play on words there, I love it. ForeVR, virtual reality. Yep. So who are you exactly as a company, and what's your main focus?
Sure. So we started during the lockdown, and we just had our 2-year anniversary in July. And, kind of where we are now is we've launched bowling and darts, and we have 2 more games. I don't know if I'm supposed to reveal what they are yet, but we have 2 more games coming out in the next 4 months.
You're the CEO. You can do what you want, I guess.
I don't want to get in trouble with my head of marketing, but we basically, I can tell you the next game is cornhole. But basically we're bringing people together in a connected experience. So you and your friends could meet up in bowling and then go and decide to play darts or cornhole together. And, basically creating a metaverse that's, instead of sort of an endless horizontal plane where you're wandering around looking for things to do, instead we have connected games or like vertical structures. And so people enter and play one, and then they can take a portal and go and visit another game. And, we're having a lot of fun. We're at 40 people now. We're fully remote. We started off remote and we're staying remote, and the employees love it. We're figuring it out as we go. We want to make sure that we create a great place to work, and so far, so good.
Wow, congratulations. I absolutely love your story. I'm also a fan of cornhole. It's the best backyard game there is, if in my opinion. So perfect. Let's talk more then about this metaverse and how we're helping to create it. America, what is the topic for today?
Sure. So the topic is designing the future of the metaverse. And the question is, how can we build a metaverse we are proud of? And you already told us the why. So please, could you share more about this question?
Sure. I mean, what I think is interesting about this time is this word metaverse. It's being tossed around so much that people are even kind of getting sick of it. And they're like, what does this even mean? And, you know, depending on which sci-fi books you read, if you're like a Ready Player One vision of the metaverse, or you're going back to Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, like, what is this? Is there really one metaverse that everyone's a part of, where my assets that I have in one game can be translated into this other game, and what's it all going to look like? And I see some things happening that I think are really encouraging. When you see a game like Minecraft have 250 million plus monthly active users, and it's like the world's greatest Lego set. When I was a kid with Legos, I never had enough of the color I wanted. I never had enough wheels. And here you have this game where it's like this vast canvas, and users are encouraged to create and express, and that's kind of the coin of the realm of that experience. And then you're seeing kids get older, and then they graduate into Roblox, and then there's 170 180 million MAU, monthly active users, and there's fewer creators. 80 million users dropped off, and fewer making things, and more people are consuming, and there's brands and Chipotle's in there, and it's kind of a thing. Then kids get older, and then it goes, the next one is Fortnite, and Epic's done a beautiful job, but they have 70 or 80 million users. And so we're seeing people kind of get spread around. And I think that part of the problem is that we haven't made a metaverse that is better than real life. Like, in some ways you can fly, you can do things like that, but why are we creating economies and things like that that punish or that deny the fun to vast numbers of people? So, I'll read a headline about someone buying a piece of virtual land next to Snoop Dogg in Sandbox, and for $500,000. And it's like, wait a minute, we are creating the metaverse now. We creators, consumers, consumers vote with their feet. We are creating this thing now. And 100 years from now, people are going to be continuing to develop a metaverse or multiple metaverses. So do we have a generational responsibility to like push pause and say, hey, how can we make this thing great? How can we make a version of this that people thank us for later, that in the history books, they look back on it and they say, oh, when these people created this, they did it thoughtfully. Why not give everyone a house in the metaverse? Everyone gets a house. 1 billion people have a digital house. Why not? It doesn't matter if you're close to Snoop Dogg. You can go and spend $1 on a Snoopachino that, changes your voice, or you get some cool, Snoop inspired clothes or something. Like, why do we have to make scarce real estate, a foundational piece of this? And so all of these questions we can be asking now. And if we ask them now, we have a shot at building something that we'll be really proud of. And, I'm excited about this topic because I really do want to make products that, that people love and that they thank you for.
Yeah, and I think you bring up actually an extremely interesting point that, to be honest, I'd never even thought of. I'm not too much of a gamer myself. It's mostly my daughter. I did get addicted to one called Township a while back, but then I got bored with it. And I unlocked everything, and now I'm like, what's next? And so Township, if you're out there listening, create something that's next for me. I'm asking you. But I mean, my point is this. I think going back to what you were saying earlier in the show about the ability to bowl on the moon, right? When we're talking about a universe that doesn't actually exist and anything that we can create, which is why I think sometimes animated films are like so much cooler than live action. And even though we've got CGI and whatever, it's like your imagination is literally the limit. So why are we limiting ourselves to replicating a world that has some pretty cruddy elements to it, right? In this unlimited universe that we can create. And I think it's absolutely beautiful. And I'd never really seen this connection between the metaverse and, let's say, like DEI, for example, where we can be the absolute most diverse, equitable, and inclusive possible. And somehow we're limiting ourselves to replicating the shittiness that exists in real life. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah,
What's the pushback that are people getting from this? I mean, honestly, capitalism, it's games, we're about making money. So how would you see those two realities, reality with the no reality? How do they properly merge?
Well, I mean, I think that you have a couple of challenges. One is, especially in an economy like we are teetering on now, it is hard to raise money. It's harder to raise money than it was a year ago. And you want to show results. And if with the NFT space, with Web3, a game that has 50,000 passionate users could do insane revenue compared to a game that has 5 million users, in mobile. And so we're in this weird kind of place, but I think everything will settle down. The reality is, if you want people to try something new, then you should make it easy for them to try it, not hard. And so if you make a game that, for me to even try it, I've got to spend a couple $100 to get into it, then you're automatically going to shut down. You're going to limit the potential total addressable market of that game. And so, I think that for some of these technologies to become mass market, they're going to have to figure that out. And, I think that the venture community is also going to have to be willing to take a longer term view on what is going to work over time. With games in particular, there's this kind of there's this old saying that games are a hit driven business. And it's true. Like, if you build a hit game, you're off to the races. If you build a Minecraft or Fortnite or whatever, it's like you're off to the races. But at the same time, there are plenty of companies that have done really well building a lot of games and having them be connected. So I don't think that there's a one size fits all.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's also the beauty of it, and just really kind of focusing on the mission and the purpose, like what you're bringing it back to, about what we can ultimately be proud of. So let's talk about ForeVR. Like, how are you different? I mean, I know you're young still. I think you said 2 years. What a great time.
Thank you for calling me young, Kim. When I looked at the mirror this morning and I saw the gray beard, I was like, oh, I'm not so young.
But it's nice. It's
symmetrical.
It's great.
Young at heart.
Yes. Young at heart, and ForeVR, I think 2 years in. How are you building this out? How have you made it different? And I always have this question about accessibility, in the sense, when I think of virtual reality, I'm automatically thinking of like headsets and different, lots of physical equipment that's, hardware that's required. And how are you making this sort of accessible and affordable, or what's different about you?
Well, I mean, the thing that's cool about virtual reality is, with the Quest 2 headsets priced at $300, which is, the cost of a pair of Apple AirPods. And it's an unbelievable value. PlayStations cost twice as much, Xbox is twice as much. And, so you could get into a Quest for $300, and then you have plenty of money left over to buy games. But I think the bigger question you're asking is really about, how do you make your startup a great place to work, and how do you adapt to being a remote workplace? And so, there's some things that you lose in not going to an office, right? Like, you don't have your coffee buddies or whatever. There's some rituals there, and there's like a kind of magic that comes together in the brainstorming. And so we try and work around that with meetings, and we have a thing that generates random coffee dates and things like that within the company. But I think the main thing that we've tried to bake in is an understanding that we are building this together, right? None of us are mind readers. If this is your thing, our thing. So ForeVR Games, every employee gets equity. It is our company. And I am the CEO, but I want to hear from everyone all the time. And so, I make sure to have meetings I have meetings with my employees every week, where I sit down and we just catch up.
While bowling on the moon.
while bowling on the moon. Sometimes bowling on the moon, sometimes just like this. And I want to know, like, how are we doing? Are you getting enough feedback to grow in your career? Are you digging the games that we're making? Are you excited about a future with us? We do a lot of surveying of our employees, and we want to get it right. And, we don't always get it right. And when we don't, we're like, oh, we got that one wrong, And then we adapt. But the main thing is understanding that in our lifetimes, we might get to work on, I don't know, 5 or 10 things, like really work on, like there's, jobs like we had when we were kids, like I call them jobs, where it's not additive to something. Like I worked in a shoe store when I was a kid, that was a job. I didn't wake up and say, I'm going to go sell shoes, but I wake up, I'm like, I'm going to go make games in VR. And so, we only get to work on 5 or 10 things. Like, how do we make it count? 20 years from now, I want every woman and man on my team to look back at this time that we spent together and say, hell yeah. Yeah, I made money on it, but look at what we made. Like, look at what we brought into the world.
The legacy.
Yeah, the legacy and the process. It reminds me of, I'm a mom, and I have always been an animated film, fan. And obviously there's the leader out there and with Pixar. And every year, I think the trend that I've personally been seeing with the most recent films, things like Turning Red and Encanto, Onward, and the most is that the creators are actually telling their own stories through animation. And my question for you, where I'm getting at with this, is when it comes to creating a game. Now, I know from what you've mentioned so far, a lot of it is, cornhole or like physical, games that we all kind of know. Mm-hmm. But like, what's the investment look like as far as the game creation? Like when they're turning out a film, I mean, it's years to create this film and investing a lot of yourself. Is that a sort of similar process for you all, or in the gaming world, when you're creating this universe?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's interesting. We make a game. We're called ForeVR Games for a couple of reasons. One, it's like ForeVR. And the other one is that there is a kind of game that's called a ForeVR game. So for instance, Words with Friends, we made at Zynga, and poker at Zynga, which is still in the top 50 after like 10 plus years of being out in the world. And what you do with the ForeVR game is the game itself is so good that the people go in and they fill it with their own stories. So, my nephew is going to remember that time he bowled on the moon with my dad, and my dad will not, sadly, eventually won't be with us anymore, but he'll have that memory. And so when you create a ForeVR game, it's like you build it once, you build it right, you keep tuning it, but you built a great game, and then you create the envelope for people to come in and explore and make their own stories and memories together. So with Words with Friends, if we changed it too much, people would get pissed off. They're like, what did you do to our game? And like I play that game every day, Words with Friends, with my Aunt Sunny, who's in her 80s. And that's how we like stay in touch. And so the story-driven games have less replayability typically. So it's like you go in and you might have like 40 hours of fun, but then you kind of burn through all the content. And then you're like, oh, okay, is there another one? And the games that I make they're really a goal of you being able to continue to play that game for a really long time. If 10 years from now, I think people will still be playing our games because we just made the best bowling game, and we'll just keep it at the top of the charts.
And for example, how intuitive is the game for someone, for example, your father? I don't know if he is like an expert on VR or something, but how is the process for people like them?
Yeah, I mean, the goal that we have in mind is one finger. So when you put that headset on, you're totally immersed. Like, in our game, you might be in the lost city of Atlantis. There's fish swimming around you, okay? And you've got this thing on and you can't see your fingers. And there's these buttons and you can't see which is button A and which is button B and which is the button X. And so we make it so easy that you could push one finger, any finger, and pick up the bowling ball and throw, or pick any two buttons to pick up a dart and throw the dart. And so the goal is to bake the design down and make it as simple and as accessible as possible, but still make it feel like the more you play, the better you get. And that's the magic.
That is magic. And I think not only is it liberating for different age groups, but even like physical limitations that people might have. Have you
Yeah.
heard feedback from your users, from your gamers, your players of like, I feel alive because of your game? I mean, maybe because I'm able to do things that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
Certainly. I mean, we have people that are wheelchair bound that play. We people find each other too. You know, they make new friends. We have a Discord group. People connect and they have experiences in games that are as powerful as in real life. Before I joined Zynga full time, I had played this game. We had a simple kind of like, it was like Boggle, where you'd look for words. And I used to play with my friend Jackie all the time. And she's like, oh, you know, you should play with my mom. She beats me at the same level that you beat me. And so this is, you know, a long time ago. I became friends with
Networking.
I became friends with her mom on Facebook, though we had never met. I'm like friends with Jackie's mom now on Facebook, or I was. And so we started playing together all the time. And then she'd be like, oh, you know, how's it going? Did you meet anyone yet? I'm like, no. She's like, Jackie's still single. I'm like, yeah, I know. We're just friends. And, you know, we would have this kind of rapport. And then, you know, one day she stopped playing and I'm like, hey, what happened? And it turned out she had a stroke and she couldn't play anymore. And then she passed away. And I felt it. I never met her in person. We never even spoke on the phone, but I felt her loss in my heart, like she was like a friend. And these connections that we make in play, like these connections are real. And in our games, you know, there are like women's bowling leagues that meet up. And, you know, we try and create this like safe space for people to connect and play. And, you know, when we were talking about like, how do we make a great metaverse? It's like, what behaviors do we not tolerate? Right? Like if there's people that behave, like we gotta, you know, we as game makers, we gotta protect that environment. We gotta basically say, hey, no, you know, that's not okay. Right? And these kinds of experiences, and you know, if one of your kids went into a game and had a bad experience, or someone was, you know, behaved inappropriately, like that could leave a lasting impression on a young person. So, you know, I think that we can all do better.
That's beautiful.
Sorry,
I
just brought it down at the end.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. It's beautiful because I think that theme of connectedness is absolutely fantastic. And it wasn't a downer at all. I think quite the opposite. And I think it's interesting and probably not even a coincidence that you went live and have been sort of thriving throughout the pandemic times, because it's a way that people were able to connect physically when they couldn't actually connect physically. And I think, what was that experience like for you, going through that element? Did it impact your thoughts on like, this is the reality that we have, how can we make it even better? Or did it impact the fact that, you know, our purpose is real? What was COVID and pandemic and quarantine like for you as a company?
Yeah, I mean, look, I feel really lucky that we were able to create games at a time for people when connection was really wanted and needed. And I mean, you know, as the pandemic hopefully moves into like an endemic phase, and people can have a healthy relationship with games. You know, the idea of making a game that somehow takes over someone's life, it's like, I'm not interested in that either. You know, play the game for an hour, go bowling for an hour. You know, don't go bowling for 10 hours. That's insane. You know, and I don't have, again, it gets back to like, what is the world that we want to create, right? So, you know, we as game makers could decide like, hey, you've been playing for 4 hours. Do you want to take this headset off? Like, go take a walk, you know? Like there's nothing that stop us from encouraging a healthy relationship with these kinds of entertainment. I mean,
do you incorporate some type of like, I don't know, like alerts or like advisories? Like how could we as creators do that to make sure that people aren't bowling for 10 hours?
Well, in our case, the good news is that the battery doesn't last that long on the headset, so you're going to have to like turn it off because it's going to run out of juice. But you know, we see companies doing things like, admittedly, I was binging The Boys on Amazon, and it said, "Are you still there? Like, are you still watching this? You've been sitting here a long time." And I had to confirm, yes, I'm still watching it. It was like a little bit of Amazon saying like, "Shame on you. You know, go and take a walk or something, or why don't you come back tomorrow and watch some more?
Perfect. We actually have a live question that came in, and this was from Antonio Osuna. America, what is that question?
Yeah, so the question is, have you seen Sword Art Online and thought if you did? It's a really cool anime where people get stuck in a virtual reality massive multiplayer online role play game.
I haven't played it.
Apparently Antonio is a Sword Art Online
Yeah.
fan. I think he wants your feedback, Marcus.
Antonio, I haven't played it yet, but I assure you, you just like own my weekend now. Like, I'm totally gonna go play it. Like, I don't
He's
even
like,
know.
whatever I said about being connected for 10 hours, forget it.
Yeah, I don't even know Antonio, but I trust him completely. It takes very little to get me to try a new video game, like very little. And so I'll go check it out. But I think that those kinds of games, like, I love fighting games. I still get on the PlayStation with my friends and play Mortal Kombat. Like, it's one of these things where, when we're little kids, we forget it, right? But our parents used to just hang out on the carpet and play games with us. Like, that's what our parents did with us. And then we get older and they have to kind of like lay down the law, and the relationship changes, and we get older. And then, at the end of their lives, all our parents want to do is be around us. And that playing together somehow gets lost in all of it. And it was so beautiful a time, and I think that making sure to find time to play and enjoy life is really important. And hopefully our games and the metaverse deliver on that for, generations to come.
Yeah. And I think you're right. It's somewhere in the middle, we sort of lose sight of play, right? We start out playing, and then I think near the end of our lives, we kind of come back to the play. I don't think it's any mystery as to why you've got, the classic old ladies bridge clubs. And my mom was a big cribbage fan. Do you have a cribbage game there in your VR reality? Cribbage could be a fun one.
There's no VR cribbage that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But I'll add it to the list.
Do it. All right, you got it. I'll hold you to your word. But yeah, I think you're completely right that somewhere in the middle we lose track, and I think it's beautiful, your mission at Forever, to kind of keep us playing all throughout, and also sharing with me that realization that you did, with Minecraft going into, like, there is this evolution that happens, and gaming companies are there to help us walk through it, and I think it's beautiful.
If you look at what's happening there, those games, the one that had the biggest audience, it was all about creating. Like, that's what the purpose of the game is. You're not walking around going into a Chipotle.
Things or yeah.
You're
yeah.
Perfect.
So Marcus, we are actually at the end of our half hour today. And so we want to flip it back to Forever Games. You've talked a lot about the company you're building, the culture that you've created, remote work, and, how you keep your folks happy. So with that, let's talk about 3 things. First and foremost, I want to know, who are the type of people who come work for you? Who is it that you're looking to build this with?
We're always looking to hire the most passionate and talented, women and men that we can for all of our positions. We have openings now for senior engineers with Unity experience. We have product manager opening, and we're just, if you're passionate about games and you think that you've got something to offer, send your resume and visit forevergames.com and visit our jobs board. But basically, it's about people who show up for work, and they're not just punching a clock. It's like, wow, I wake up every day and I'm excited to work on this, and hopefully the idea of making worlds in VR and making sort of family friendly fun games appeals to you too.
Perfect. And then with the startup, I think you've laid out a couple things already of what you've done right over this past 2 years. But what is something that maybe you would have done differently? Like, ooh, I would have done that differently. That didn't quite work out the way if I could do it over again, it would look like this.
I think that there's little things like, you arbitrarily decide which are the holidays. And it's like, just let the employees choose the holidays, like, let them vote on it. I think including employees more and more into as many decisions as you can it takes 2 seconds to do a survey, versus just handing it down. I think increased transparency everywhere that you can is what really works. We've also invested in, we use a tool called Lattice that really helps you do performance management. And I think employees need more of that with remote work than they do when they're in person. When you're in person, there's a lot more, hey, good job, America. Like, great job on this and great job on this, Kim. And there's just less of that in remote. It just doesn't translate the same way as if you're sitting in a bunch of cubicles and I walk by and I'm like, great job, America. Everyone hears it, versus posting it into Slack. And so I think recognition systems, I think if I could do it over again, I'd find even more ways to do that.
All right. Well, thank you. I think that's really, really, really great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today, Marcus, for introducing us to ForeVR. We wish you nothing but success as you continue to change the gaming world, particularly the VR world, for good and help build something to be proud of. Hang on with us just one moment after we go off air. But before we do, what's tomorrow's show look like, America?
Tomorrow, we're going to have an interview with Ken Meir. He is the CEO at Bukuship. We're going to talk about building trust with e-commerce consumers. Yeah. How can online retailers create trust and increase brand loyalty? That's going to be tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Marcus. You have a great rest of your day, and our viewers will see you tomorrow. Thank you.